Sometimes I feel like the luckiest person in the world, and when I weasel my way into the back rooms of places like the Met Museum, I stop and think, how am I even here? And today I am flanked by two people that are so special to me, Marcelo Del Doce, who has been teaching me how to paint in watercolors for the last 5 years, and Stephanie Herdrich, who is the Curator of American Drawings and Paintings here at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Stephanie, as always, thank you so much for having us.
It's a pleasure. I'm really happy to welcome you both. And we actually all go back a few years at this point.
We do.
Yes,
I've also learned a bit of watercolor from you, but
thank you.
Yeah. It's always an honor, and I just want to tell people, if I can sing your praises, you have published how many books on Sargent over the years?
a bit, a few,
Like-
yes. Yes, a good handful, and
You
articles.
know how many? How many is it?
I don't actually know.
Like-
I mean, there's been
like-
articles and books and
But
catalogs.
Even
that
the
I'm,
book
yes.
yesterday that I was referencing with Marcelo, the big, thick book, I mean, that's a catalog of Sargent's works that belong to the Met.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's all to say that Stephanie really knows so much about this man who is a legendary artist. And whenever I visit the Met, I always feel like I'm coming here to visit a ghost. And I feel like you're the gatekeeper.
Oh,
I feel like you're the person that very politely and gently opens the door for me to meet this man. Because while we're looking at paintings and drawings, especially the things that are publicly on display, we're looking at them and we're admiring them. But when you know, did he die with sheet music on his chest? Did they find him on his bed the next morning with sheet?
He may have had sheet music, but I think he was also reading. He was reading something
poem or
French?
something.
Okay,
Yes.
so something like that.
yes,
And I read
some
that in
literary-
the
yeah.
Charteris
Yes, the-
biography of Sargent. These are the intimate details that Stephanie has encyclopedic knowledge of Sargent's life and work, and in conversation she will reference things that give artists insight into how to go home and how to actually not only be inspired by the life that he lived, but the actual technique. So today we are so lucky because Stephanie is showing us things that are not on display publicly on a regular basis, and those are Sargent's watercolors. And Stephanie, why can't watercolors be displayed?
Well, these are very precious works of art to us. They are painted on paper, and they are sensitive to the effects of light over time. So when exposed to too much light for long periods, the colors will fade, they will get sunburn, so to speak, just like we do. And, we are trying to steward this collection for eternity and limiting their exposure to light so that they will last for generations to come. And every time we take them out of dark storage and reveal them, I'm bowled over by how vibrant they are and they remain, and the colors are still so fresh, and the immediacy of watercolor like this, I think you'll both agree, we feel that Sargent was just here painting these with deliberation, with effort, but also the spontaneity of working outdoors and capturing these amazing sunlight scenes.
Is there in the museum world a standard amount of time, like in a set period of time? Do you have this all written down? Hey, this painting was out last year for 2 months, so it can't go out. Is this all sort of...
We do have kind of equations and levels of lights, which are measured in foot candles, about how bright the light can be, the length of exposure, and we do have a kind of a general equation of, for each month we expose it, we put it into storage for a period.
Wow.
And it's not written in stone, and we will, not exhibit something for quite a long time, knowing that we want to exhibit it for 8 months. So we think very carefully. We're always working with our conservators, who are key partners in this effort to preserve the works.
Marcelo brings classes here regularly, and Stephanie graciously takes out these works to help his students. Marcelo, can you talk to us about why this is so useful compared to looking at something on a computer or looking at a print in a book?
Well, first of all, thank you again, Stephanie, for letting us to see these works, which is not just unbelievable that they are not in display, and it's just a unique way to see, but especially because they have no frame. So we are seeing things here with no glass, no reflection, and it's a very, very special opportunity to see them. And for your question, bringing students here and seeing these works, as you see without glasses, we see absolutely any decision that he had done. Any book that you have, as better as might be the quality of the print and the quality of the scanner, it will never bring this amount of details and the texture of the paper, and especially the transparency. So seeing this here, it's really like almost like being over Sargent's shoulders, which is quite special.
So this watercolor is called Venetian Canal. Sargent paints this in 1913. Of course, Venice is a place that he adores and returns to year after year, especially from the late 1890s, to paint there. Venice captivated him. The effects of light on shimmering off of the water, on the architecture. This is something he loves to paint. He delights in the expatriate community there. He has many friends. It's really one of his favorite places. And I think you see that in the watercolors, the pleasure he takes in painting this site, these different sites and this scene. This watercolor is really, I would say, a formal example of his work, in that this is a work he made for exhibit to sell. The Metropolitan Museum purchases this watercolor from him, along with a group of another 9 watercolors, in 1915. So he knew early on that he was creating works that were sought after, that would enter public collections. As such, I do think it's a bit more formal than some of the works we'll look at today. You'll notice that he has signed it in the upper right corner there.
So one of the mysteries of watercolor, and especially Sargent is still a puzzle of how does he do this, right? It's like, it's effortless, it's magical, it seems easy, but it's not.
We should also remind viewers that these were not painted from a photograph. He was probably sitting in a gondola while painting this, and everything's moving, including that beautiful light, right?
Yes, yes. Most of the paintings that you see in Venice, that you have a pointed gondola, he isn't at the gondola. I don't know if in this one he might be in one bridge, but either way, he's fighting against time. Has a quote by him that's in watercolor, use the best of the emergency, which is you gotta basically work with this problem, which is it's drying. And most of the time what you see, which is these large connections, they are done by letting the painting still be wet and connecting them. So I have here, this is just my low-tech explanation about watercolor. So he needs to deal not only with the layers that he's adding, which every time he adds a layer, it gets darker, and also how one color changes on top of another. So it's a very unpredictable medium. And that's actually the quality of the work, because even though we might have a plan, they might have an idea of what to do, things are happening. And which I think is the biggest struggle of students, because they try to control this. And at least for what Sargent does, is he basically let it happen. The accidents are the part of the work. This is breaking down. This is actually oil, but how he would think if he was painting this. So it's about layers. So you have different layers. In this case, I broke it down in 3 layers. This would be layer 1, which is usually the wash. So if you see here, this is what you might say is the T value, which is very washy, like you might say 30% of pigment.
Like the first layer.
Yes, here on the top you see that too.
The blue sky?
The blue sky. But the better way to see would be this one here, which this is a poorly idea of how he had done this is made in Photoshop and printed, you know, in transparent paper, but it gives you an idea of how at least he's approaching. As I said, the first layer is just an overall idea of what it is. The first layer, the only intention is to capture, you might say, the mood, the light, no details. The only thing you are trying to get here is the intention of the light and leaving the whites.
Right, because we should remind everyone, in watercolor, this is one of the greatest difficulties, is the white is often the white of the paper. It's not put on at the end.
Up in here too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the white of the paper. So if that gets covered, it's kind of gone. And
Especially here, right there.
right, like right here.
Yes.
You can totally see that up there. I also just should point out the other thing, Marcelo, that you're always doing, even when you're doing these master copies, is temperature, like cool and warm, and even in places like this where it seems pretty obscure, this is not random. This is not just random pink and blue, right?
You already are setting the tone of the environment. If it's sunny, if it's foggy, that first layer already gives you the feeling of the time of the day. If it's, you know, the golden light.
Yep.
So what had happened is, for most, let's say, beginners, it's that people tend to start this way, right? With the details, the linear part. This is the last thing you do. These details, which he had done there, these are your last decisions. What you do is you think first in the terms of first wash, like 30%, leaving the whites. And then here comes the biggest work.
Layer 2.
Layer 2, which is the shadow. This is when you start to identify where are the buildings or what is the reflection. And most important is, as he's doing this, and remember, this is a poorly Photoshop print. Simplified.
Yep.
But as he's doing this, he's connecting the colors. The cold and the warmth, they're all being interconnected. So if, let's say, a student that's painting and waiting to dry,
Yeah.
you're going to have tons of overlaps. And every time you overlap, it creates an information.
So you're saying that this was all painted when it was all still wet.
And it will be a one shot.
Oh, one shot. And we can see it. This is the amazing thing about looking at the original, is you don't see any lines overlapping in that layer.
You see lines that are texture from the buildings, or in this case, the windows.
Right.
But
The next layer, right?
yeah, but each decision is very well thought, very well planned. However, as he's painting, things happen, and you just accept what happened.
I think so many people don't realize how extraordinarily difficult it is to work in watercolor. And, you know, Sargent was so good at taking advantage of mistakes or the unexpected. But for unexperienced or novices, you know, this could turn like into a pool of mud.
Yes.
As you're adding layer on layer of wet pigment. You know, all of us have had that experience sometime, or in kindergarten where we're mixing paints and suddenly everything is brown and black. So the imagination, the structure, the planning that goes into this is so extraordinary. And I always learn so much from hearing you talk about these layers.
No, I appreciate that. Because there is a limit. The more he would add, the more mud. Can I say the word poop?
Say the word poop.
It becomes, right, brown, and he knows that limit.
Right.
Because it will overcook.
This is a Venetian passageway. This is a little bit earlier, we think around 1905. This is a work that came to the Met through Sargent's estate. And this doesn't seem to be a work that he exhibited. Maybe, you know, we can talk right away. What strikes me about this work, in addition to the way he captures the city, we feel as if we could be floating down a canal in a gondola and getting these views of these dark interior passageways, which is really, really evocative of the city. But this sheet has this fold in the middle, which we can talk about our theories as to why that might be there. But at whatever point he folded it, I think that then ultimately precludes him from exhibiting it, whether he thought, oh, I don't like the way this is turning out, I'm going to abandon it, or what do you think?
He was famous for erasing the portraits of people that he didn't like,
Right.
how the painting was going.
Right.
And he was always looking for this very economic, expressive, almost like the fencing sport way of attacking
Right.
the painting. My theory was, I was talking yesterday with Rajiv about this piece, is like, you gotta see this as like Sherlock Holmes. These are just theories, right?
Right, we don't know.
And what I know is, and how I feel, this is extremely expressive, loose, spontaneous, and there is a very tightness right here in this column here. So I think he abandoned because he wasn't happy with this. He wasn't happy also with, look how the opaque of the lines, they are made it twice, can you see? Even though he had like done a little thinner lines right there, he went over with a little thicker. So I think that bothered him, how he had to go back. And this is my theory.
And there's no correcting in watercolor.
One shot. I always joke, Stephanie, when the museum is gonna declare that they did an X-ray of a watercolor.
Oh, we've done them.
You have done?
We have done them.
But
yes.
can you see something?
Yes. There
Wow.
are some, and I can show you later, some are remarkably drawn out.
Okay.
Very carefully
But they're opaque.
studied. You can't always see all the lines. And others have no preliminary drawings. And this is an example where we can see some lines of the architecture, and to me, they almost look as if he used a ruler.
He did it, yeah.
They're so precise, which is not very characteristic of him. So he's drawn a lot more details than we
Yeah,
expect here.
I think there is a problem. This is my theory. He's in a gondola, which is moving. He has no control. I don't know what's happened. And then he had this problem of, he had no time.
Right.
So I think this was just abandoned.
And it's so interesting that fold line, which I didn't even see in the book, because I have this in Stephanie's catalog at home in the book, I didn't notice that there's that fold line, and how something as subtle as that fold line can tell us so much about the artist's intention.
And also it tells about, a watercolor, it's a one shot. And Sargent wasn't, the most flamboyant and say I'm a genius. He would have some works that he would be struggling and he would have doubts. So the master of watercolor had doubts about his final results.
But let's point out that he saved
That's
the
true.
doubts as well, which I
true.
also think is so interesting. He's someone who is so prolific. We know by all accounts that he was painting constantly, working on many works at the same time.
Yeah.
And he saved the things he wasn't sure about,
Yeah.
which is amazing for us. A lot of
Well,
them
lucky.
came to the Met's collection, so we learn a lot about his technique, his practice, his, dare we say, well, we'll say less good days.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're still treasures, and
Yeah.
all of us would hang this in our home
Oh my
in a
goodness.
heartbeat.
So as you very quickly talk about first layer, the golden light, right? It's more complementaries, yellows and blues. This probably more like a foggy day. You see it's a little more opaque. And the goal is just to get the idea of what the place is and leaving the highlights, right, from that column.
Those are the whites of the paper.
Yes.
Again. And you can really see on the original that there's not a lot of white. It's really just that column and the stonework, and then the reflection. And if that's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, there is a little white right there on that water.
And how important that is to make it feel like water.
Because it's the reflection from that.
Right.
So that's
right. Wow.
And then here comes what it's the most difficult part. This defining these reflections, which are very light right there. See, they're more the brownish, like burnt sienna light.
It's so amazing because when you look at it up close, you think, oh, that doesn't look like much. Like this is also the novice's mistake, their error. They're like, I need to paint water, I need to paint waves. And you look at how the master has executed it and you think, what are those? And yet it's really when you view it from far away, I mean, it's like how Sargent painted pearl necklaces. Yep. They're almost nothing up close.
Then here it's when the image starts to become, right, the decisions. And remember that every time you have a next layer, and that's, I would say, the biggest difference between Sargent. Sargent, as he gets next layers, he gets thicker. It gets creamy. What's his quote? Never starve your palate. Oh. So it's juicy. It's not dry. And then the final one, it's when things, just remember this is just a pour.
Right.
But it shows.
So this is one layer, and then there's even more. And it's amazing that even just with those little dark details, that's when so much pops.
And a friendly reminder, especially for beginners, yes, you don't start the painting this way.
Which is very tempting. It's like, I see a dark door. Let me paint that dark door, which is, that's what I used to do. It's like, let me outline that. This is what I would have done were I in that gondola. Let me paint that black part first. And this is where it really helps to be standing in between an expert painter and a curator. Marcelo did this study at my place as a very quick exercise in analyzing how Sargent might have painted this, and he did mention to me that the original is a lot bigger.
So we call this watercolor simply Man with Red Drapery. It doesn't have an official title that was given by Sargent. This is another watercolor that came to the Met's collection from his estate with many, many other sheets. We think this is painted around 1900 based on his interest in that period and his watercolor technique. And this is a moment that he's thinking a lot about working on his murals for the Boston Public Library, an amazing, massive, ambitious scheme depicting the history of religion, where he's really hearkening back to his academic training, studying the human figure, using his studies of the human figurative figure as in a generative way, experimenting with poses, different poses, capturing them, painting them, and these will, I think, ultimately kind of become part of the process of painting his murals. But this watercolor with this very dramatic gesture and pose kind of fits into that moment in his career. And to me, this is such an incredible watercolor. We sense, again, the immediacy of it. And there's this academic tradition that it comes out of, but I think also this extreme sensuality and which makes it really incredible. The contrast between the way he kind of builds the human figure with very little drawing, and then the intense red colors and the expressive brushstrokes all around the edges is really, really remarkable. And I know Marcelo will have so much to say about this because this is one where you really can see the layers as he's building the form of the foot or, the shadows of the abdomen, and just incredible to me. And
what I think it's amazing, it's especially if you see the shapes. So it's all about this abstracted shapes. So you see, for example, the shadow on his under the neck. It is sort of like a triangle, right, with a little blob on the bottom. But every time you see these shapes, there's multiple colors happening. Look, for example, this shape here of what it seems a shadow from, I don't know, a drapery or pillow. In one single shape, you see more like a gray and a little more oxide, and you see a little blue there. And here in the middle, you see purple. And then you see oxide colors, and here is a little more green, and then here it fades, and then it connects to the red. So it is this traveling of the color. And look how, for example, here that connects with this calligraphy. So it's an amazing, like, how he really redefined the way watercolor was painted. Stephanie, I would like to hear we never talk about this, like how Velázquez was important for him and how this idea of capturing the light and not describing things.
I mean, Velázquez is one of the artists that he admired. Velázquez and Frans Hals, these two great, 17th century masters of painting who were admired for an expressive painterly style. And that is, I think, we'd say an expressive brushstroke, broad strokes, not obsessing over the little details, of being able to use the brush and the pigment broadly to give us so much information. And as you were saying earlier, his ability to suggest form with just this broad stroke and gives us so much information. It has, I always marvel at this one on the belly button. The way he reserves that, there's that white spot there. Is that no, that might be, is that on top or that's paper?
That's
paper.
Yeah,
so that was preserved.
Yes.
Without accidentally covering that up with any other color. No. And as Marcelo said, I didn't even notice in the original, in the print in your book, Stephanie, but look at how even what's dipping into the belly button is multiple colors.
Right.
There's red in there.
Yeah, and you can see, if I'm reading it correctly, right, the way the color is moving down the page and pulling there to create the dent of the belly button. Like that's genius,
crazy.
Right? Yeah. And that's what we've all learned from you, Marcelo, is you don't paint flat with the paper down, right? You have to,
because that will give you, as you see, the colors ends on the bottom,
right?
So that it's the color being collected by, right? Because you can see, for example, look here, that is more like a oxide color, that it's moving towards the red. Yeah. Can you feel the gravity of how that color is moving down? Is because that angle. So the angle means that he's painting always with some sort of, like 40, 30 degrees.
So the paper, meaning that the paper is not flat on the table or flat on the bottom. It's propped up so that the actual paper is sitting on an angle.
Right.
So that water flows.
Right. And here he's actually taking advantage and exploiting the gravity to create the shadow in the belly button.
If the painting is flat, the pigments goes everywhere.
Yeah.
And actually you have less control. If you have a little angle, it's always going down, so you can just basically control that. And
like here, right?
Yes.
Like this was a drip. Mm-hmm. This Marcelo's is one of the words he mentions in every lesson is calligraphic strokes, and this is one of those beautiful examples where someone would say, "Oh, I'm not going to ruin this painting by making a mess," and this is what Sargent is so confident with, right? Like
his quote: "The bigger the brush, the better the artist." Something like this.
Okay.
You're correct. But can you look at the size of this brush? This is a massive brush that goes like dig, 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 dig.
But this too.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, who does that?
Yeah.
He's just, you can imagine him being,
Yep.
That's a bold move.
Yeah.
After he's,
But for him, these decisions are related to the image. So every move is related to how the light is being affecting the object, the body, the water, and just a quick thing that no matter if it's a landscape or whatever it is that he's doing, is the same idea. You have a large application of pigment, reserving the white. See here, Stephanie, the little white right there. and then you have a next layer that starts to define the image, and you define some parts of the anatomy. Then you define the, like for example here, this is when he probably did it, this calligraphic mark making, and then later just finish with the final details.
One of the other things I think is so beautiful about this one is the contrast between these very transparent layers and then the intensity of the red and the dark brown and whatever he's maybe. Do you think he's putting a medium in there to thicken it, or? But I
think it's just the pigment.
Yeah, but the contrast between the light washes and the intense saturated colors I find very beautiful.
Because they have more the British tradition. We're gonna see his sketchbook, how everything is so thin and so like built in multiple layers. Here the decision is made in, I don't know, 3 or 4 layers because he has more pigment. The technology is better, there is new pigments. The reason we're gonna see some colors that are so like oxide or turquoise or purples, because the quality was more intense, rather than just, let's say, earthy, more brown colors from past paintings and watercolors.
One of the things that I've learned over the years from not doing it properly is ending the painting here, because I'm scared. So I've been painting away very, very, very carefully, and I think, oh, it's done. I think I should stop here. And I've learned from Marcelo that this is also a metaphor for life. The brightest lights shine brighter against the darkest darks. My friend's dad's an art teacher, and once when she was just lamenting about something, he gave her a paper and said, draw light. And when she gave him the paper back, he said, do you realize that in order to draw light, what you actually drew was the shadow? Right. The darkest parts are sitting always next to the brightest highlights. And I was so scared of putting this dark a color on the paintings that I would just stop. But when Marcelo would push and say, darker, 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 I realized, oh, it's just it's the tiniest bit of darkness. Like all it needs is that, and look at how it just all comes to life. It's the same with the actual painting.
And just the last thing is that even when it's dark, it's not black. Mm-hmm. There is temperature. Look how this dark, it's colder. Here it gets a little more warmer. So here on the leg, you see how that's a little colder. So sometimes there is this misconception of dark means black. Yeah. Dark means there is still temperature there.
Right. So this watercolor is done a few years later. This is called Tommy's Bathing. It's done in 1918. And this is a very interesting moment in Sargent's career. He receives a commission to become a war artist, to go to the front lines during World War I, to do research, to make a large painting illustrating collaboration between international troops. And of course, while he's there, he is also painting in watercolor. And Tommy's, what these figures are known, comes from the name Thomas Atkins, which is a kind of generic name used on official forms in the British Army in the period. So they're known as Tommies, like we would say G.I. Joe or something. So Tommy's Bathing is a fascinating depiction of wartime. He is showing the soldiers completely off duty, swim after presumably having bathing or swim in this body of water, relaxing, sleeping, dozing in the tall grasses in a very kind of nonchalant and intimate pose. Sargent is clearly fascinated with depicting the human body, the male form, and the effect of light and shadow and these cool and warm tones against the grass. And, in technique, composition, and subject matter, it's such an unusual work. This is we know in reality from some writings and letters that Sargent was really affected by what he saw when he was on the front lines, and he witnessed the effects of a gas attack from mustard gas. and makes that the subject of his painting ultimately. But then he's still also almost kind of escaping from that trauma and painting these off-duty, very sensuous scenes. And this one just also kind of blows my mind. It's one that he never exhibited again. He's clearly experimenting. We just often get the sense with Sargent that we talk about how he's constantly painting, but that, you know, something captures his attention and he must paint it.
Yeah, it's almost like he captures like this, you know, the second of what happened. It's never like pose, like, hey, you stay there, okay, you stay here. I need to think about it. No, it's moments, like almost like a snapshot of a photo. And for the technical part, which I could spend hours just in this, like the most, I think, unbelievable part, and back to a little bit about the Velázquez, is that the body and the background, it's melting together. There is no separation. It's not linear. It's not an illustration. It's not like a collage. Some aspects of like some watercolors that might not work is that as someone might paint, they are, you know, painting the background and then the figure separately. If you see the shadow from the grass, it connects with this figure leg, which becomes also this shadow, which is also the background grass here, and it connects again and then ends in the leg. So you are thinking broadly, you are melting every time. And that becomes, I would say, more natural, because as he's doing that, like you can see ourselves, things around us blur into the background, right? We don't see things sharp. A photo might see that, like a good photo. But in this case here, especially by doing this, is also in relation with the reflected light. So if this grass might be a little warm, a little more oxide, if he touches that on the body, it gives a sense of reflected light that it's happening. So it's not just about connecting, but the colors, they are also like, you know, always in some sort of a change. To look, for example, here in the figure leg, which becomes the butt, it's colder. And then as it moves to the grass, becomes green. And as it moves to the bottom, it's the green from the grass. And you see here on the top, that's a little more peach from his body. The shadow becomes blue. Do you see a little blue there? And that melts to the green from the grass. So it's this extremely planning, but also it's fun. You can see that as he's doing, he's just like, oh, I'm going to put a color here. Oh, I'm going to put a color there.
And there's no line. I mean, I think that's the other thing, that it's like almost like a trick that if it's done really well, you don't notice. But there's no line discerning those separate colors because they're all painted while they were still wet.
And your brain finishes the painting.
Right.
Like by just getting this line, you see this shape, which is a very abstract, you know, if you would cut this image here and you just blow this, it's an abstraction. But it gives them an idea of the figures, but the shadow from the grass and the shadow from this part. And then as you squint your eye, you finish the painting. This, you see here on the nose and the mouth, it's just dots.
Of like the warm parts.
Yeah.
The pink.
You know, Frans Hal, you know, Sorolla, all that painterly school, you know, back to Titian. You when you get in a specific distance, it's abstraction, and then as you move farther, it becomes the representation.
Mm-hmm. Stephanie, I'm going to ask you something that if it's like we shouldn't talk about this because we don't know or whatever, I don't have to leave it in. But
yes.
I'll ask you, and then if we're allowed to leave it in, we'll leave it in.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Go
So
to the question two.
Okay, so Stephanie, the thoughts that people might have over the years were this piece displayed in public, you mentioned that Sargent never showed this piece. One of the things that I kind of can't believe is that when I was a teenager, I thought for sure I would live a life of secrecy, not being able to share who I really loved, which were other beautiful boys. And I can't believe that my world changed to a place where I'm living in a city and I can hold hands with a guy and walk down the street safely here, at least here in Manhattan. And when I look at this painting and when I think about what I've read about Sargent, about the time in which he lived, there are assumptions that maybe he was never married, he painted things like this, we feel something, and the time was so different. What do you know about that part of his life?
I mean, he was intensely private, and he had a huge public career. He lived most of his life from the 1880s in England, where sodomy was illegal until shockingly recently, in fact, and he was very deliberately private. We don't have journals and diaries about his personal relationships. I feel certain that he was gay, and many of my colleagues and scholars believe that as well. The evidence is in his relationships, his circle, his acquaintances, and for me, the evidence is really in the works of art, where I feel the sensuality of his gaze on the male figure. I would say his technique is very sensuous in general, but when we see works like this, the intensity of it, the pleasure he's taking in painting, the intimacy, a work like the Tommy's Bathing, which I think he probably began knowing he would never exhibit it. He's painting for pleasure. He's maybe thinking about, his plans ultimately to paint this scene, as I said, after a gas attack. And so there's bodies spread across the pavement who are suffering and ill, and in his head, he may be thinking of just, studying the human form for him was the foundation of his work. But in a work like this, which is so intimate, so tender, I think for me, there's no denying that he was attracted to men. Do we know if he ever acted on it? We don't have records. We don't have that kind of smoking gun or love letters. But for me and for many others, the evidence really seems to lead that direction. And, it's I think the public nature of his life and his career and his desire to maintain patronage is another piece of that in the time and kind of the manners and mores of society that, he also felt it, he probably felt that it protected his reputation and gave him access to more circles of patronage that, some people might have shunned him because of it, or he may have limited his opportunities. But that said, we know that he was very charismatic, and there are so many descriptions of him. Some people say that he could be nervous and shy and awkward, but he was also clearly charismatic, and people loved to pose for him, right? We know from descriptions that he was charming and played the piano and told jokes and was very entertaining. So, he's someone who had a lot of depth and was very, intellectual and well-read and moved in fascinating circles of all kinds of personalities, and had many, many friends who we know were gay. We can talk for hours about the fluidity of Victorian sexuality and male friendships and complexities.
Tell you that right now I'm reading Virginia Woolf's journals, and you mentioned Sargent didn't have journals. Virginia writes in her journals, God forbid anybody ever read this.
Right.
But she writes passionately about her female lovers.
Right.
And she also writes about her male friends who were gay.
Right.
And it's very clear in the journal that they have this safe circle. Leonard knew that she was having relations with a woman and was fine with it, would drive her to the lady's house.
Right.
So it's so fascinating. It's to read about the private lives of these people. And it's interesting that in place of Sargent's journals, was this a journal of sorts?
Right,
Because it's private.
Right.
Did he let something out in the way that Virginia's medium was writing?
Right.
And she writes so passionately and vividly about Vita Sackville Vest. So my next question was, were these guys, did they stay still for the entire duration of this, or was it more likely that he took a little sketch and went back home to a studio and painted it there? I've always wondered about this painting specifically. Did he say, "Hey guys, can you just lie there"?
I mean, I can imagine a scenario where whatever, they have an afternoon off, they've bathed, they were swimming, and they are napping. And he says, "Is it okay if I paint you?" And they're dozing away. There is at least one other watercolor in this series. So he paints a similar scene more than once. So maybe this one was made on the spot quickly. The other one was worked up further out. It's hard to say.
Okay.
I also, to your point, though, I wonder sometimes if Sargent's sexuality was just really kind of more like an open secret.
Right.
And there are some scholars have read into certain letters or descriptions of him that suggest it was an open secret. Mm-hmm. And, you can take some phrases and letters about him. There's one famous letter that the scholar Trevor Fairbrother, who did amazing scholarship on Sargent's sexuality well ahead of his time and of many of the Sargent scholars, where a friend says, "Everyone knows Sargent's just interested in the gondoliers." And people read that as, he loves these handsome men, which he probably did.
Yep.
But we know the passionate way he paints and was always painting, that he would also be fascinated by the movement of those figures on the canals and capturing it. So we can read into these things different ways, but there's no point where Sargent says, "I am gay and I am in love with John Doe."
Right.
But I think all of the other evidence is very, very compelling for me.
I appreciate you taking this question, because if there is anyone in this world to ask this question to, it's Stephanie.
You're kind.
No, it really is, and that's why I just use this opportunity to ask you the things that I've always wondered about or that I learn, and then the next time I see you, I have another question, and this was kind of a big one. I think that in my position, I am very well aware that I'm only able to live this way because of what has come before me, and the people that were not able to live this way, and the people that fought in this city alone, the people that stood up and said, "You're saying it's illegal, you're saying it's a sin, and I'm saying this is my life." Like, that's not lost on me, and I see quiet whisperings of that in this, and it kind of makes me sad sometimes, that someone could not do what I'm doing today, and they can let it out in a certain way with their genius, but there's still a restriction.
It's not something that was talked about for many years in Sargent scholarship, and I've been studying Sargent for
your life.
3 decades to date myself, and it wasn't talked about in the 90s. And I have seen over the years, and with the Sargent in Paris show last summer, for example, how much it means to people to talk about it, that were so many visitors to the show who saw themselves in Sargent's life or in his art, and the human side of him and understanding this means a lot to people, and these connections, and kind of, as you say, like, that we can all, talk about it and live our lives in New York City, especially in this day, is important to acknowledge.
If it can help someone.
Right.
If it can help someone make that very difficult decision to be themselves, despite what difficulty they're going to face, because they will.
Right.
I speak as an example of someone who made that decision, and I can't imagine my life now if I had lived just keeping all of this a secret.
Right.
And so that's why I'm compelled to talk about it, and I'm grateful that in your field there's probably protocol and etiquette and but I'm really happy, and I recognize that museums are making this effort to be more accessible to everyone, and it's becoming a part of the job, and I think that that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure, and important topics.
Yep.
So these two watercolors we have on the easels now are both from the 1890s. I think this one is probably early 1890s. It has a kind of generic title, Marketplace, not given by Sargent, but more of a descriptive title. We now believe that this is painted in Cairo. So this is a watercolor we hadn't been able to identify for many, many years. And we now know with some certainty, because of Sargent's sister Emily, who also painted there, that this is done in Cairo. And this is, Sargent paints in watercolor his whole life, of course, but he really starts pursuing it earnestly and more frequently in the 1890s. And this is a kind of, from that moment where he goes back to it with a lot of energy and excitement and begins painting more and more frequently as he's traveling more often as well, as he's preparing and studying to paint these murals for the Boston Public Library. He's traveling to ancient lands of the Bible to prepare and research. So this is done on one of those trips. And of course, as we all know, watercolor is a great medium to travel with. It's much more portable, dries faster than oil, and Sargent really uses that to great effect during his travels.
And this painting has one of the most spectacular, I see as like almost like a nonsense mark making. Like everything, it's so calligraphic, random, but as you step back, it makes so much sense. Like all these blobs and very abstract, the sister Emily painted the same way, the same place, and compared to him, which she's a little more precise, a little more cautious. He's just, right, it's very wild, and I think it shows really this confidence and how long he's been doing this, which is right since he was like 6, 7, right? And we were gonna see the sketchbook, and which is rare, but sometimes he does. You can see some opaque here, the yellows. Probably he missed, and he was just like, I need this light back. Sargent would use whatever he needs. Sometimes some wax to basically mark some sort of a mask, and sometimes some opaque, which you see here, and you see a lot on this one here. You see tons of opaques right there, a little bit here and a little bit here. So the trick that I think that's the challenge is when you paint watercolor and you are using opaque, I think it's charming and show, let's say, your planning, your security, when you are just bringing, like you see, for example, right here, little lights from that ball, you see, little whites. So you're just bringing highlights that you were missed, like here. There is a little one right there. So if it's just, let's say, bringing notes that you missed, it's totally fine. And it's actually, in this case, even bringing a little bit of this, like, shady shadow. You see a little light there too. One thing that I don't suggest is to rescue your painting with opaque, because then it stops to be watercolor, which has transparency, and it becomes gouache. And I usually say, why not just paint an oil painting from that?
So among the many treasures of the Met collection, our Sargent collection, and I haven't said yet, I think that we have about 300 works on paper by Sargent, including a number of these early sketchbooks. And this sketchbook here, as you see, is from 1870. Sargent would have been 14 years old when he worked on this sketchbook. It's a summer that he begins by taking a walking tour of the Alps with his father, and then he ends up in Venice. There are many, many landscape paintings in this book, but it's a rare opportunity to be able to flip through them. They're very fragile. They are displayed occasionally, but you can see here, this is Sargent's own hand, J.S. Sargent, Venice, May 23rd, 1870. So as he's embarking on this great summer adventure, he's already determined that he'd like to be an artist. And so this summer is about being outdoor with his father, kind of doing this manly outdoor exercise, but also cultivating his practice in painting. I am going to flip to the page that we want to look at, and I will note that someone probably will comment, we tend not to use gloves handling these works of art. We have a clean hand policy because gloves can sometimes make your hands less sensitive and can lead to different kinds of accidents or, God forbid, tearing a page. So we're very, very careful and practiced in this, and that's why I'm not wearing gloves. So this is in the Swiss Alps, pages and pages of watercolors in this book, but we really see, well, great talent for a 14-year-old.
Oh my God.
But the emerging artist, and I think it's always important to know we talk about Sargent's gifts as a painter. He is a remarkable painter, but he is working, practicing painting, studying the world around him and sketching from the time he is very, very young. So by the time he's 14, he's already been drawing for 8 years.
Can you talk a little bit about his mom influence, how she taught his watercolor? And you mentioned once that she had some sort of, you gotta make 2 works a day, something like that?
So his mother was an amateur artist herself. And, in the mid-19th century, it was very common for women, kind of genteel hobby, to work in watercolor, and for children to paint in watercolor to kind of develop their hand-eye coordination. But Sargent's mother herself was an amateur artist. She loved to travel. She made sure her kids traveled everywhere. They explored the continent. They were peripatetic and traveled seasonally. And she really encouraged all of her children to sketch. And according to family legend, she required that if they were going to draw or sketch, that they must finish at least 1 drawing a day. So they couldn't just draw, start a sketch, start a sketch, start a sketch. They had to spend focused time. And I think that, she has a very strong influence on him, not only this wanderlust and travel and exploration, but this commitment to studying the world and recording it.
One of the most amazing thing about your exhibition, Sargent Paris, was that I saw the mark making evolution.
Yep.
And I can see, especially in the sketchbook, listen, this is an unbelievable work for a 14-year-old boy. It's unbelievable. But there is a huge difference between this and this. This has not just the confidence, but back to what we were saying, here he's concerned with the shapes and the effects of light and how simplified and how expressive and how economical he can define an image. Here, it's a different approach. This is a little more linear, more filling it up, little things. This might be a little more descriptive. Like would be like early, you might say Turner, Bonington, which is the British tradition. A little more, you might say, precise, and what Emily was doing in that painting, a little more cautious. Here, this is wild. So I would love, especially to see these 2 ones, to see that these only happen, as Stephanie had said, by making work. I usually joke that nobody goes to the gym and get muscles by watching someone else working out. And it comes by making. In his case, 1 a day, or so because your hand will never happen, or it will never acquire this, movement by, just watching. So it's a matter of making.
there's such a, as you're saying, like a literal quality to this, right? And when I look at the way he does the water and the ripples on the water here versus here, I mean, it's such, the comparison is fascinating. The confidence, the expressive quality.
You'll see in these amateurish portraits that painters will sometimes hide the hands because they're so hard to paint.
Yeah. Some of those itinerant portrait painters, right, they would charge you extra if you wanted the hands.
Yes, yeah, I heard
Hands
that.
are hard.
It's hard, yeah.
Right. Well, you know when you go to a restaurant and you thought the meal was going to be great, but then it blows your mind and you keep eating and eating and eating. Stephanie, every time I come here, I feel like I've had the richest meal. And to be here with you, Marcelo, I feel like I was scraping and scraping the plate. And this is going to be so gratifying, and I'm going to be so satiated for so long. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for organizing this. Oh my goodness.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's really a pleasure for me always to spend time with the works of art and to talk with people who know so much, and importantly to just share our love and thrill for Sargent's work. I mean, we could all do this for hours and hours. So this is a taste, a sample menu, or what do you get? A tasting menu. It's a tasting menu. But I hope it really does encourage everyone to look close and pick up a paintbrush.
Yes, that's what
don't be daunted by it.
Totally. Don't be daunted by it. Because Stephanie took a course with Marcelo. But I do want to encourage anyone, as Marcelo said, you only learn by doing it. And if you're afraid of failing, that's usually what keeps people from even trying. So don't be afraid of failing. Go through the paper. And when you don't like it, tear it up or fold it in half. Exactly. Because you never know where it's going to end up 200 years later.
And save your kids' juvenilia, because you don't know. Maybe Marcelo would be training your kids.
Totally. Where those sketchbooks are going to end
things.
up. Thank you both.
It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.